Political polls are predicting a knife-edge election. Prime Minister Christopher Luxon shrugging them off.
I'm not focused on polls or talking about myself. What I'm focused on is New Zealanders.
While opposition leader Chris Hipkins seizes an opportunity.
I'm not surprised they're losing faith in National's ability to deliver on the promises it made them.
This week, what exactly is the opposition promising? How would all three opposition parties work together? And who's really in charge on that side of the House? Kia ora, ko Anneke Smith aho, anei te pūrongo tō rangapū mō tēnei wiki. Welcome to Focus on Politics. It was an unusually mild winter's day in Christchurch as Labour MPs gathered for their annual mid-year retreat. The caucus in good spirits roughly 1 year out from the 2026 election.
Lots of energy. I think people are really keen to look at next steps leading into 2026. There's lots of opportunity for us to change the government, but we've got work to do.
Very positive, lots that we're working on, and there's a lot of excitement building into what our campaign is going to look like going forward.
Yeah, no, look, our team is strong. Very united. It's a team that's focused, and I've felt that all the way through.
Less than 2 years after a bruising election defeat, Labour has good reason to be pleased. It overtook National as the most popular party in Monday's Taxpayers Union Courier poll and grew its support in Tuesday's One News Varian poll. Neither poll would return Labour to power, but being in with a chance at this point in the electoral cycle is a good result for a party so decisively ousted just 2 years ago. Labour leader Chris Hipkins has returned again and again to his jobs, health, homes mantra.
I set out at the beginning of the year what our focus is: jobs, health, homes and re-election on the cost of living. I think New Zealanders can see that all of those things are getting worse under this current government, so I'm not surprised they're losing faith in National's ability to deliver on the promises it made them.
It's a mantra listeners can expect to hear a lot more in the coming months. Without putting any policy on the table, Labour has relied on criticising the coalition's policy agenda and its cost of living promises. This is by design and for several reasons. Chris Hipkins is wary of blowback on promises he makes but cannot keep.
One of the things I'm absolutely focused on is making sure that any promises that I put out there at the next election, I know that I can deliver on. I know that there have been plenty of examples of all governments in the past making promises that they haven't been able to deliver on. I don't want to fall into that trap.
And will be all too aware the coalition parties are poised to pounce on any tax reform he puts in front of the electorate.
They would desperately love more things to attack us on. That's true.
Labour has all but confirmed it will campaign on a capital gains tax next year, but the process of getting to any announcement is a long one. Members put up policy remits the Policy Council then vets and recommends to the party's New Zealand Council and its caucus. Party President Jill Day says it's a rigorous process, and for good reason.
I think the thing we're really aware of is we need to make sure that whatever we decide makes sense to New Zealanders, but also that we can explain it. And so it has to make sense in a bigger picture. Like, if we're going to do that, why? Why do we need to do that? So we have to make sure we've got a really clear explanation as to why we would be doing that. And I think New Zealanders really want to know that, because I think people know that fundamentally something has to change. But we need to make sure we can explain that in terms which people can work with. So,
do you think, reflecting back, even back before your time, that Labour hasn't been able to explain it? That's what sort of tripped things up? Or?
I think really, significant changes like this, it takes time for people to sort of understand how it works. And I think sometimes we actually have to have those conversations for an extended period of time. I think if you look at the arc of change for many things, it doesn't always happen the first time. You need to have some conversations, and then people start looking at the system and go, it really isn't working, maybe there's something in that.
Labour's strategy of holding its cards close to its chest may be paying dividends right now, but it won't work forever. At some point it will have to tell the electorate what it's bringing to the table, or risk someone else setting the agenda. The Green Party is working hard to fill the policy vacuum on the left, releasing a swathe of policy, including its own green budget, that promises free doctors' visits, basic dental care and early childhood education that would be funded by a suite of wealth taxes. Co-leader Chloe Swarbrick says the Greens are leading the left.
We're not just here to lead the opposition, we're here to lead the next government. And we hear loud and clear from New Zealanders across this country that they are hungry for the solutions that the Greens are putting on the table.
A bold statement following a bold call to action for the party faithful at the Greens AGM last weekend, asking members to find common ground with those they don't agree with.
We win when we acknowledge none of us are perfect, when we recognise and empathise with that in others, when we find our common ground and act from there.
It's talking to people. A lot of people don't actually understand the policies and the plans that the Green Party have and the ability that we have to really make a difference for so many people at so many levels. So it's a lot of it's talking to people. Most people here ended up here because someone talked to them.
Yeah, I think we always have to reach out to beyond our Green members, to find new membership, to find new support, and even talk to people who disagree with us.
You bet, yeah, no, everything we can, because it's so necessary to have as big a group as we can standing up for those green values, particularly at the moment with the government we have.
Enthusiasm aside, the Green Party is more talk than walk when it comes to dominating the opposition. Sitting at around 10% of the general vote, it would need to more than triple its support to make this claim a reality. Or would it? Co-leader Marama Davidson making an interesting comparison at the very end of the co-leaders' media stand-up last weekend.
Setting the agenda isn't just about numbers. We've got a government right now whose tail has been wagged by two smaller parties. Our Green members and the party are really excited about the power of what we can do when we're working with communities.
The latest political polls suggest any left bloc government would require at least some support from Te Pāti Māori. Like the Greens, it's also focused on mobilising communities, and it's put forward policy aimed at eliminating poverty, with ideas like taking GST off food and introducing a capital gains tax on houses. Co-leader Rawiri Waititi says his party's role is holding any major party accountable to Te Tiriti, though it's worth noting National was quick to rule out working with Te Pāti Māori ahead of the last election.
I think it's important that we're there with Labour to ensure that they deliver to Māori based on the obligations that the Crown has through Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And I don't think we've had an opportunity. In the last election you saw, Te Pāti Māori could have, for the first time ever, determine who the government was. And so we are now in a position of growth that will put us in a position where we will be determining who the government is. And so we're quite happy to work with any party, left or right, that have that is Tiriti centric, that have policies that are Tiriti centric, that ensure that they honour Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and that there's Tiriti justice all the way through. But those are the things that we will be having those discussions with Labour. At this particular time, our goal is a one-term government, and so there's too much pain being inflicted by this particular government, particularly on Māori, particularly on those who are in poverty, particularly those homeless has increased, unemployment has increased, and particularly with our takatapui communities, with our wahine, all our women out there, in terms of pay equity. This is a government that has no aroha for those particular sectors, and they will turn up come 2026, and this government will feel the wrath of the people that they have harmed.
Both minor parties in the opposition are talking a big game about their potential influence in a future government. Their confidence somewhat backed up by what the minor parties in the coalition government have achieved policy-wise this term. Associate Professor of Politics at Victoria University, Lara Greaves, says one-term governments aren't the norm in the MMP system, but it's not a normal time right now.
We traditionally haven't seen really very many single-term governments. There was the third Labour government led by Big Norm Kirk, who passed away during his term in the 1970s. But we traditionally haven't had these one-term governments. And I keep getting reminded by a colleague that actually Labour wasn't doing too well in their first term before COVID. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing National not doing so well in their first term. Gone are the sort of days of someone gets elected, they form a government, they set about their policy agenda, there's a honeymoon period, they ride fairly high in the polls, and then the voters kind of are positive towards them or not over time. And, at some point their popularity slips, the leader resigns, and there's a change of government too. So we've kind of gone away from that model, and it's a little bit, external events, the way that politics and democracy is headed, and a little bit government performance. And I guess there's also a lot of questions around whether and how MMP is working for us. So it's a bit of an unusual one, having a first-term government struggle, but I, again, am reminded of that precedent of Labor pre-COVID. Maybe politics as usual has been a bit upended.
Lara Greaves says elections are either lost by the government of the day or won by the opposition, and Labor doesn't have much room for error if it's to win the next election.
Well, timing is everything in politics. It's a cliche, it's incredibly boring, but it's true. Timing is everything. So I think the risk with releasing too many policies right now is that there may be a hole in them, they may not be developed. I mean, for something like a capital gains tax, it has to be perfectly costed. Otherwise, journalists, but also the opposition, for the government in this case, will find a hole in the policy, and, you risk it becoming a meme. There being this fiscal hole, this being this issue. We've seen this happen over multiple elections now. So for Labor, they need to make sure all their ducks are in order before they release any big flagship policies. The other thing is now we're still more than a year out from the election. So it's really hard to think of when the best time to release any flagship policies would be. And I think at this point we're still a bit early. Election year seems to be about right overall.
The Green Party says it's leading the opposition and it's here to lead the next government. Do you think that's realistic?
It's interesting with the Greens because what happens is every political cycle, we see a situation where perhaps Labor's not doing so well, and then we start to talk about the Greens becoming the major party of the opposition. A similar sort of thing doesn't happen to the same extent on the right, but, when we saw ACT kind of go up in the polls, the bits and pieces of the conversation happen, right, in our MMP system. I don't think there's necessarily any reason to believe that the Greens would become the major party of the opposition, but it does seem to be about the right time in the term-by-term political cycle to be talking about that, even though there's less evidence perhaps than there has been in the past with the strange situation of Labor doing quite well in the polls despite having recently lost fairly badly. So for the Greens, one of the things that I noticed Marama Davidson say was that it's not necessarily that they're trying to be the numerically largest party, but they would like to have what some people have called outsized influence on the coalition that they would enter into. So they kind of want to replicate the results of New Zealand First, the results of ACT, which many would argue have had a disproportionate impact on the government's policy agenda. So I think for the Greens, it's a case of looking at the right and saying, well, ACT did it, New Zealand First did it, let's do that in a progressive government, and to then try to appeal to their voters and try to get more of those left-leaning Labor voters to vote for them on the hopes that that would make that government more left-leaning and more left-wing.
How does Te Pāti Māori fit in? Could Labor and the Greens feasibly work with Te Pāti Māori, do you think?
One thing that's really interesting about MMP, and I think the public don't think about this, is that a lot of these coalition agreements and a lot of these confidence in supply and enhanced confidence in supply and all of these bits and pieces are kind of made up over time, and in these systems they evolve over time as well. So there's quite the possibility that we'd see some kind of deal on the left that looked different to how it's ever looked before. And that's something that I would kind of suspect might happen with Te Pāti Māori. A key challenge for them is staying distant enough from the Crown, distant enough from the government to be able to be oppositional and to be able to really challenge the colonial Crown system from that sort of Te Ao Māori, tino rangatira perspective. So that's going to be quite hard for them in whatever arrangements they go into, and we've seen them lose out in the past for kind of getting too close to national or too close to the government of the time. So it's going to be a real challenge for them in that block as to what they do around confidence and supply, and really it's hard to know what their particular goal would be here. The other big thing I'm going to be watching for is any kind of strategic moves here. So the Māori seats can only be abolished in reality, in terms of what the Speaker has ruled, through a supermajority in Parliament, so 75%, or a referendum. There's the capacity here for Te Pāti Māori and Labor to do some kind of deal in terms of the Māori seats to create a permanent overhang. That is something that could happen. Now, how deal-making-y is this going to be, we don't know yet. Is this going to be a quiet handshake? Is this going to be a cup of tea in Epsom? Who knows? The other thing there is if Māori voters do, discuss this amongst themselves that, hey, give your electorate vote to the Māori Party MP and give your party vote to Labour, because that would be your best bang for your buck in terms of influence. So they have to be really careful to not rack up anti-Māori seat sentiment, because there could still be a referendum on this at some point in the future, on the future of the Māori seats. But they're kind of in this interesting strategic position where they could do this thing that makes it hard for the right in the future. And I guess that's where we'll be watching the Tāmaki Makaurau by-election as well.
September's by-election in Tāmaki Makaurau will be hard fought between Labour and Te Pāti Māori, with both parties wanting a win under their belt heading into next year's campaign. Voters can expect to see Labour formally announce its tax policy before the end of the year, which may well mark the beginning of campaign mode. That was Focus on Politics. I'm Anneke Smith. Thanks for joining us. Mā te wā.